Salwete, beginning lesson 16, and we are skipping some 300 lines, almost 300 lines, from where we last were in Book 4, where Aeneas and Dido had their interchange. Dido accused him of leaving, and Aeneas justified himself in his lawyerly response. And from that point, we go almost 300 lines, and now we pick up the action again in 659 to 705, and that is the end of the book there. As I encouraged you in the first video of Book 4 to read over Book 4 in English so that you know where all the pieces fall and how everything fits together, I would encourage you to do that if you haven't, or to review it. And I've put a summary here, which is going to give us the whole thing. But it really is nice to read it in English, and then you'll get a real good sense of the flow of the book. So what happens in these almost 300 lines is, after Aeneas defends himself, Dido curses Aeneas and his entire race, then faints and is carried away by her attendants. She sends her sister Anna to entreat Aeneas to stay, but he is resolved to go, and the gods stop his ears. Dido is terrified by omens and dreams and decides to take her own life. She resolves this. She hides her plans from her sister and builds a massive funeral pyre in the palace court. She tells Anna that this is the way either to win back Aeneas or else free her of her love for him. Dido then offers prayers and sacrifices to the deities of the underworld. Meanwhile, Mercury visits Aeneas once more, urging him to hurry his flight, and the Trojans prepare to sail. Dido, seeing the fleet departing, becomes more frenzied. She prays that she will be avenged, and Aeneas and all his race will be punished. And of course, from this is how the Romans are going to explain the Punic Wars. I mean, this is Vergil's interpretation of that, is that the Punic Wars will be this curse that Dido has placed on them, that her peoples and the Roman peoples will be enemies. She then sends away her husband's old nurse, Barci, and then prepares to take her life on the pyre with Aeneas' sword. Got a little typo in there. Oops. I'll have to fix that. So we're going to pick up the action right here. She's on this massive funeral pyre, and on the top of the pyre is the couch that Aeneas laid on, and all the things, the belongings that he had while he was there in Carthage, the gifts from Dido, and his sword, and things like this. So to Anna, it appears she's going to burn all these things of Aeneas and rid her memory, but really Dido herself takes the high point of the pyre and is going to slay herself with Aeneas' sword at the top. And that's where we pick up our story. So this is Dido atop the funeral pyre, speaking her last words. Dixit et os impressa toro moriemur inultae, sed moriamur ait, sic juvat ire sub umbras. She spoke, and, having impressed her mouth on the pillow, so spoke, we got our verb there, and having impressed, this is a participle that is used in a middle sense, so it takes the object os. Let me explain just a little bit what I mean by that. In Latin, it's active and passive are the most common voices that we see, but in Greek, the middle voice, which is somewhat of a reflexive voice, is more common, and the poets make use of this, especially in poetry when they want to express this kind of a thought. For Latin, they borrow it over from Greek. So if we look at the form of impressa, it comes from imprimo, imprimere, impressi, impressus, and it's the perfect passive participle form. But instead of being passive, having been impressed, we are translating it having impressed in an active sense. And then we're taking the object mouth with it. And Vergil does this a lot throughout the poem. He does this frequently. So since it's a participle, it has a case ending, nominative, singular, feminine, because it's modifying Dido. She's the subject here. So she spoke, and having impressed her mouth in toro, on the pillow, that's ablative, She ate, she speaks. That's present tense. Moriemur, we will die. We shall die. That is from morior, which is a deponent. Mori, mortuus, and its future, it's a third conjugation. So remember, the third conjugation in the future uses a and e to show future, not bo bis bit. And of course it has passive endings, but we translated active because it's no deponent. So moriemur, we will die. Future, deponent, indicative. First person, plural. Now it's only Dido that's dying here, but we can take this as a poetic use here. We could think of it as she's dying along with her people, I suppose. Maybe somewhat of a royal we. We will die. In ultai, unavenged. So in ultai is adjective. And since our subject is plural, we, it also is plural. So it's nominative, plural, feminine. And then sed moriamur, we shall die unavenged. Sed moriamur, got a vowel change here. This is present deponent subjunctive, whereas this one is present deponent future. So remember, clem eats clams. This is the clams. First is clem, second is eats. For first and second conjugation, clams is third and fourth. So our vowel has switched from morimur to moriamur. We've added this a in here. Oh, and I think I said earlier that it was a third conjugation. I was wrong. It's actually a fourth conjugation because it's more reary, but they do follow the same, they add the same letters for the future and the subjunctive. So we would translate this, we shall die unavenged, but let us die. Now what use of the subjunctive is this? Sometimes we've seen the subjunctive used in indirect questions and indirect commands and things like that, where there's a main verb and then subjunctive. But this is an independent use of the subjunctive in which it's the main verb. And this is a very common use of it. We call it volative or ejussive or hortatory, and just translate it, let us. Incipiamus, let us begin. Comedeamus, let us eat. Moriamur. And the reason we call it jussive, it has the idea of a command. Think of the word eubeo, eubere, eusi. It has this idea of a command. Let us die. I'm commanding us to die. Or volative, meaning this idea of expressing will. Let us die. And usually you just translate it with the let and then the verb. Sic juvat ire sub umbras. So, it pleases to go under the shades. So we have our it pleases, an impersonal verb. It's pleasing to us is implied here. To ire, to go, a complementary infinitive from eo, ire. And then sub umbras, under the shades. Far makes a note that the seek, you can imagine she's stabbing herself with his sword here. And that seems reasonable to me. Sic juvat ire sub umbras. So this anaphora here might allude to her stabbing herself at this moment. Hauriat hunc oculis ignem crudelis ab alto Dardanus et nostrae secum ferat omnia mortis. Let's take a look at these verbs, hauriat and ferat, more subjunctives, more volative or usive or hortatory subjunctives. And I use the word hortatory, that's as in encouraging you to do something. Think of the verb hortor, hortari, and that's when you're encouraging something. So these you translate with the let also. Remember, that's the way we've been doing it. Let. So we go here, let him, and the subject is the crudelis Dardanus. Let the cruel Dardanian one, that's Aeneas, of course, the cruel Dardanian one, the cruel Trojan, hauriat, drink up, from haurio haurire. And this is fourth conjugation, just like moriamur, but that's a deponent. And so we have the A in there telling us it's subjunctive. Let the cruel Dardanian one drink up hunc ignem, this fire, meaning this funeral pyre, oculis, with his eyes, ab alto, from the deep, meaning mari, right? One more time. Let the cruel Dardanian one drink up this fire with his eyes from the deep, and let him bear, same subject, him carry or bear, omina, the omens. Now that is not omnia, not all things, but omina. See how the I is in there. And so it's the word omens, meaning this portent of the funeral pyre, this bad thing, the omens of things, bad stuff to come, a curse on his people. Let him bear the omens, secum, with him, that's ablative, with him. And they have mecum, tecum, and secum. They like to do this arrangement instead of cum, se. They like to put secum, sounds better, I suppose. Nostri mortis, and now we have a genitive, of our death. Let him bear the omens with him of our death. So before we end here, just a couple notes on some of the word choice that Vergil has here. Notice this word hauriat. We saw that word earlier when Aeneas spoke to Dido and said that he drank up the god's words, Mercury's words, and with his ears. So now she's saying, well, let him drink up this fire with his eyes. I think this is a choice word here because Aeneas said it to her, and now she's twisting the meaning of it in a more sinister way. You might think, if he drank up the god's words so readily, let him drink up this fire now. She says it with hatred in her voice, in her tone. Also, she has called Aeneas a number of names, and she's called him Crudelis before. So in the next video, we're going to see the immediate consequences of Dido's death upon her people, and it's going to be quite the scene.